Can an entire country really, truly break free from fossil fuels and maybe even more controversially, from nuclear power? Not just, sustainably, but actually make it work economically.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It challenges so many assumptions.
Exactly. And today, we're diving headfirst into some really groundbreaking research that offers, well, a genuinely surprising answer.
Sounds fascinating.
Our deep dive today is into a study titled Scenarios for Sustainable Energy in Scotland. Now, this isn't just some dry technical paper. Think of it more like a detailed, visionary roadmap.
Okay, a roadmap for how Scotland could potentially transform things.
Precisely. How it could reshape our whole understanding of what's possible in these energy transitions. So our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to unpack the biggest findings from this study.
Right.
We'll look at how Scotland might hit 100% renewable energy by 2050, what that actually means for its economy, and honestly, why some of these findings might challenge what you thought you knew about energy's future.
Looking forward to it.
So let's set the scene a bit. Scotland. Well, they're not exactly shy about their climate goals.
No, they have some really ambitious targets, among the world's toughest, actually.
Right, pushing hard towards net zero.
Yeah.
But what makes their approach so interesting for this study is their really firm stance against building new nuclear power plants.
They've been quite vocal about that.
Very critical, especially of projects like Hinkley Point C down in the UK. They've called it things like risky, expensive, a bad outcome for UK consumers.
Strong words.
And with their own existing nuclear plants getting older, nearing retirement, it just raises this huge question.
Is there a viable alternative?
Exactly. A cost-effective, reliable alternative to that baseload nuclear power, especially when you think about its role, providing that consistent energy supply to the rest of the UK.
Well, this study, it dives straight into that precise challenge.
That goes ahead on.
It really does. They modeled a scenario looking at whether Scotland could produce that equivalent baseload power, the power that's always on, that minimum needed.
Right, the steady supply.
Entirely from renewable sources. And what they found, well, it was quite remarkable. They found this renewable alternative could be done at a lower overall cost, about 99 per megawatt hour.
Okay, 99 euros per MWH. And how does that compare?
Well, compare that to the proposed subsidized price for Hinkley Point C, which is 112 per MWH.
So cheaper. That's not insignificant.
Not at all. It works out to about a 12% saving for UK taxpayers, roughly $330 million every year.
Wow.
But here's where it gets even more interesting context-wise. If you take out the transmission costs...
The cost of actually moving the power.
Exactly, which they estimated at about $326 million a year for a big new 3,200 megawatt interconnection. If you exclude that, the generation cost savings jump to 23%.
23%? Why exclude it, though?
Well, the study points out there's already a pretty substantial 4,200 megawatt transmission link between Scotland and the UK.
Ah, so a lot of the highway is already built.
Precisely. So maybe you don't need that full cost for a new one. And beyond just the money, the study really underscores something else important.
Which is?
The significantly lower societal risk that comes with renewables compared to nuclear. That's often a huge factor in these debates.
Okay, hold on. So this study is basically saying it's not just possible to replace that crucial baseload power with renewables, but it's actually cheaper.
And safer, yes.
Potentially sidestepping that whole tricky political nuclear debate.
Oh.
That really does upend some conventional thinking.
It utterly challenges it.
But if it's cheaper and safer, what makes Scotland, uniquely positioned for this? And how much further does the study go beyond just replacing nuclear?
Well, Scotland's key advantage is its incredible natural resources, wind especially. We'll definitely get into that.
Okay.
But to your second point, oh yes, this study goes much further than just replacing nuclear. Much further.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, I think. Because replacing nuclear, that's big. But modeling a completely defossilized energy system for Scotland by 2050.
That's the goal they explored.
And the cost. That's the truly counterintuitive part, right? You'd normally assume 100% renewable means paying a premium, an extra cost for being green.
That's the common assumption, yeah.
But what did this study actually find about the costs of that fully green long-term vision?
Yeah, this core finding really defies expectations. The study calculated that a 100% renewable energy system for Scotland by 2050 could be achieved at an annualized cost of around $10.7 billion.
Okay. $10.7 billion. And how does that compare to, say, a less ambitious scenario?
That's the kicker. It's actually about 8% less than the $11.7 billion they projected for a system that was only 75% renewable.
Wait, cheaper? Going fully renewable is cheaper than stopping at 75%. How does that work?
It sounds odd, but it comes down to smart system design. It's this combination of really effective energy storage, deep integration between sectors, electricity, heat, transport, and flexible generation from renewables you can dispatch when needed, like hydro, bioenergy, synthetic fuels.
So optimize the whole system avoids other costs.
Exactly. You dramatically cut down the need for expensive fossil fuels, and you avoid the costs associated with emissions. Over the long run, these savings actually outweigh the higher upfront investment and the fixed running costs of the renewable gear.
That makes sense. You pay more initially, but save massively on fuel and carbon later.
Right. And it's worth pointing out the study's cost assumptions for renewables, they're probably quite conservative.
How so?
Well, look at recent trends. The cost of solar PV just plummeted, down 72% between 2009 and 2017. Onshore wind down 27%, offshore wind down 44% since 2012.
So the real cost might end up being even lower than the study projected.
It's certainly possible. It makes the economic case even stronger.
So we're looking at a potential future where going fully renewable isn't just the right thing for the environment, it's actually an economic advantage. Cheaper long-term than sticking partly with fossil fuels.
That's the implication, yes.
That really flips the whole cost of going green argument on its head. It sounds almost, well, too good to be true. What are the big hurdles? How do they propose getting past them to actually realize those savings?
That's a fair question. It's definitely not easy. The study acknowledges you need significant upfront investment, a huge build-out of renewables, storage, that costs money.
Right, the initial capital.
And you need the right policies, regulations, frameworks to make it all happen to encourage innovation. The study tackles this by showing those long-term operational savings we just talked about and by laying out a really detailed technological roadmap.
Okay, so let's get into that roadmap. We know it's possible, potentially cheaper. How do they actually build this 100% renewable Scotland by 2050? What are the key pieces of the puzzle?
It's a complex picture, definitely multifaceted, but wind power is absolutely central. Scotland just has phenomenal wind resources, both onshore and offshore.
Huge potential there.
Massive. The study projects that in that 2050 100% renewable scenario, wind power would account for something like 77% of primary energy and 83% of electricity generation.
Wow, 83% of electricity from wind. How much capacity is that?
About 23.4 gigawatts electrical, or GW. That's the peak capacity they could generate. A huge amount.
But it can't just be wind, right? The wind doesn't blow all the time.
Absolutely not. Other renewables are crucial for balance and flexibility. They see solar PV contributing about 10.1 GW, tidal power adding 1.5 GW.
Tidal and wave too.
Yep, wave power at 0.3 GW, and existing hydropower at 1.7 GW, which is great because hydro can often be turned on and off quite flexibly.
Okay, so diverse generation. What about storage? That's always the big challenge with renewables.
Critical piece. And they have a multi-pronged strategy here. For short-term balancing, think minutes to days, they envision 220 gigawatt hours GWH from vehicle-to-grid batteries.
So electric cars feeding power back to the grid.
Exactly. Plus about 85 gigalegend of pumped hydro storage, the classic water battery.
Yeah. And for longer term, like covering winter when there's less sun?
That's where they look at things like 10 gigawatt of thermal storage, basically storing heat, especially for district heating systems, and a really massive 6,500 gigawatt of grid gas storage.
Gas storage? But isn't this a renewable system?
But this is where clever sector integration comes in. Using technologies like power-to-gas or PTG.
Right, you mentioned that, making gas from electricity.
Essentially, yes. Creating synthetic natural gas using renewable electricity, perhaps via electrolysis to make hydrogen first, then combining it with CO2 to make methane.
And why is that so useful for Scotland?
Because Scotland already has a huge existing gas network, around 25,000 kilometers of pipelines serving nearly 2 million consumers. So you can repurpose that infrastructure, use it for flexible energy storage and transport, and leverage existing skills.
That's clever, using old infrastructure for new energy. What about power to liquids, PTL?
Also crucial, especially for those sectors that are really hard to just plug in and electrify. Think aviation, shipping, heavy trucking. PTL involve creating synthetic liquid fuels. You use renewable electricity, split water for hydrogen via electrolysis, capture CO2, maybe directly from the air.
Wow, pulling CO2 from the air.
Yes, and then using a chemical process, Fischer-Tropsch synthesis is the technical term.
Sounds complex.
It is, but it essentially lets you combine that hydrogen and CO2 into liquid fuels. The study sees these providing about 21 terawatt hours. That's a huge amount for those hard-to-abate transport sectors.
So synthetic jet fuel, diesel, made from air, water, and renewable electricity.
Basically, yes. And finally, underpinning all of this is massive energy efficiency improvement across the board.
Can't forget efficiency.
No way. Especially in transport, electric vehicles are projected to be almost 300% more efficient than petrol or diesel cars. Think 5 passenger kilometers per kilowatt hour versus maybe 1.24.
A huge difference in how much energy it takes to move someone.
Massive. And in heating, widespread adoption of efficient heat pumps could meet over 80% of space heating demand.
Wow. Okay, that's a really sophisticated, deeply interconnected vision. It's like a whole energy ecosystem they're describing.
It really is.
Not just making power, but storing it, converting it between forms, using it way more efficiently. So what does all this mean? Beyond the grid, what are the impacts for actual people in Scotland? For jobs, for the climate, and maybe for other countries looking on?
Absolutely. The ripple effects are potentially huge. The study paints a picture of really comprehensive change with wide-ranging benefits.
Like jobs, for instance. That's always a big concern in energy transitions.
Definitely. And the study estimates significant job creation. That 2050 100% renewable scenario, they reckon it could create roughly 25% more domestic job years.
Job years. So total employment over the period.
Yes. About 300,000 job years compared to around 225,000 in the less ambitious 75% renewable scenario. And these are diverse jobs: manufacturing, construction, installation, plus long-term operations and maintenance.
And what about existing energy sector workers? Scotland has a big oil and gas industry.
That's a key point. The study suggests many existing skills, particularly from oil and gas, could be adapted. Think offshore wind installation and maintenance, synthetic fuel production, hydrogen technology. It offers a pathway to repurpose those skills.
And just transition, potentially. What about climate? That's the driver for all this.
Well, the outcome there is pretty stark. The 100% renewable scenario achieves near zero greenhouse gas emissions. Just 0.11 megatons projected for 2050.
Virtually zero.
Practically. Which strongly aligns Scotland with the Paris Agreement goals and crucially does so without relying on strategies the study calls risky.
Like carbon capture and storage, CCS.
Exactly. The study explicitly concludes CCS isn't necessary for Scotland's energy transition. It labels it as carrying unnecessary cost and risk to society.
Interesting. So what do they suggest for any leftover industrial emissions?
They lean towards carbon capture and utilization, CCU. So capture the CO2, but then reuse it maybe in industrial processes or making those synthetic fuels we talked about, turn a waste product into a resource.
Okay, that makes sense. And finally, you mentioned citizen participation. How do individuals fit into this big picture?
They're seen as an integral part, actually, not just passive consumers. Think about vehicle-to-grid services, car owners actively helping stabilize the grid.
Using their car batteries.
Right, or flexible electricity demand, people shifting when they use power, maybe encouraged by smart tariffs. The study sees that covering about 8% of end-user demand. And then there's distributed generation, like rooftop solar panels, which they see making up 60% of all the installed solar capacity.
So it's not just huge wind farms, it's millions of homes and businesses actively involved.
Exactly. It shows that the sustainable future isn't just about massive infrastructure projects, though those are needed. It's this blend of technologies, smart policy, and getting the public actively engaged, empowering people to be part of the solution.
That's a really powerful, holistic vision. It suggests this isn't just an engineering challenge, it's a societal one too.
Very much so. It's about integrating everything.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive today into scenarios for sustainable energy in Scotland. What we've seen is, well, a truly compelling vision. It maps out a future where 100% renewable energy isn't just technically possible, but it actually looks economically better than other routes.
Cheaper power than nuclear, potentially.
Right, cheaper power, thousands of new jobs across different sectors, and getting emissions down to near zero. It really pairs that environmental ambition with some hard-nosed economic pragmatism.
And I think what's really significant here is how these findings provide such a strong counter-narrative. You so often hear that serious climate action has to come with huge economic pain.
Sacrifice argument.
Exactly. But this study showcases how strategic, Smart investment in renewables and integrated system design could actually lead to energy that's more resilient, more affordable, and genuinely sustainable. It could really be a benchmark.
A potential blueprint for others.
Mm.
So as you, our listener, reflect on this detailed analysis from scenarios for sustainable energy in Scotland, here's a thought to mull over. Given what this study lays out, what kind of political will, what technological leaps, and maybe what shifts in public attitude would really be needed for other nations to embrace such an ambitious but maybe ultimately beneficial energy roadmap?
That's the big question for everyone, isn't it?
It certainly is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope it's given you plenty to think about.